She is a church leader. When she finds an evildoer disrupting the church's work, she shrinks back and just observes. Why can't she stick to the principles and protect the church's work? What kind of corrupt disposition is hidden behind this? How does she address it?
In August 2021, I started practicing as a church leader. While interacting with Lillian, who was the gospel work leader, I noticed she often made a big deal out of small problems people had and told everyone about them. She couldn't work well with others and always said things that were against the facts. Once in a gathering, she said a church leader who had been transferred didn't focus on gospel work and never asked her how her work was going. But in fact, that leader always followed up on her work. Also, she reported that the work was going really well. So people thought what she was in charge of was proceeding normally, when in fact, she didn't get any real work done. In one gathering, she kept stressing the difficulties in her work, saying the gospel workers were no good. But when I looked closer into the details, I found lots of work she hadn't done, and she had no basis for saying that. I called her out for not doing practical work and shifting the blame. She didn't say anything in response. I thought she'd do some self-reflection. But surprisingly, she sent my partner Maya a message saying she wanted nothing to do with me, that I'd blindly dealt with her when I saw a problem and didn't understand her difficulties. She also said she couldn't be like me, but had to treat the brothers and sisters with love and patience. When I read this, I was stunned for a moment. There were so many problems in her duty. I was only pointing them out to her, not pruning or dealing with her. How could she say I blindly dealt with her? That's not what happened at all. How could she be so slippery and cunning? I wanted to explain things to Maya, but I got halfway through a message to her, then hesitated. If I sent a message explaining or describing Lillian's issues, Maya might think that I lacked self-awareness when problems arose and didn't treat people right. At that thought, I didn't send the message. I heard, afterward, that Lillian used opening up her heart to others as a kind of pretext, to say I blindly dealt with her without knowing the background, and it had gotten her down. Hearing about this was really upsetting. I didn't know how I could check on her work in the future, and I felt like she was hard to get along with. Days later, because of work needs, we wanted to transfer a few people from Lillian's team to go do the work of watering newcomers. Mm-hmm. Surprisingly, the moment I told her, she said, looking sour, "Just go and transfer them. I don't care. I'm sure my work results won't turn out to be that good anyway."
There was definitely a threat implied.
Mm-hmm. You're right. Later, she said to me openly that she had an issue with the sister in charge of watering work, which is why she was against the transfer. She also said that no one could blame her for snapping back at her.
That shows a problem with her disposition.
Right.
Yes. Hearing the threat in her words, I felt like she wasn't just hard to get along with, but had bad humanity. And I had to be careful when I checked up on her work, or else she'd find something against me. One time, an upper leader assigned us to do cleanup work, to investigate and learn whether the church had any evildoers or antichrists, and if any came to light, to remove them and expel them from the church. Lillian came to mind. She had no humanity, and she refused to accept the truth. She held a grudge against everyone who mentioned problems to her, and would always distort things, confound black and white, and spread her bias. I thought I should take it upon myself to look into her behavior. But then I thought about how resistant Lillian was to me looking into her work, how she said I'd blindly dealt with her. If I went to collect assessments of her this time, would the brothers and sisters think I was using that chance to take revenge on her? Would my partner think that I loved status too much, and I'd look for ways to lash out at whoever would criticize me? Then everyone would be afraid of me and avoid me. And it would be a big problem if they tried to discern my issues and report I was a false leader. I couldn't. I could take care of it after someone else discerned her problems. Otherwise, if I were at the forefront of it all, I could be misunderstood. So I decided to not bring up the issue.
You'd clearly found a problem, but didn't investigate it. That's not upholding the church's work.
You're right. I felt kind of guilty at the time, but I still didn't say anything. Before long, Maya mentioned that Lillian's humanity was no good and wanted to investigate her. I was both happy and a little guilty when she said that. I already knew that about Lillian, and I should have investigated her behavior right away, but I said nothing because I was afraid others would misunderstand. I wasn't protecting the church's work. But at least someone else had said something, so I didn't need to worry about it anymore. After collecting assessments of Lillian, we saw that most people who had written them didn't know her very well and provided very little information. Just a few people noticed her problems. I knew that the right thing to do under these circumstances was to seek out people who worked with her more. But I was concerned others would say I was targeting her, taking personal revenge, so I didn't say anything. Then Maya said we should keep an eye out and see how things went. So I didn't say anything further. Later, I found out that other people had given Lillian suggestions, but she rejected them and made false claims. One time, a waterer gave Lillian some feedback about how some of the people the gospel workers preached to had bad humanity. Lillian not only refused to accept that, but aired her biases and grievances in front of the brothers and sisters sharing the gospel, saying they were all following the principles. But since the waterers hadn't clearly fellowshipped with the people they'd worked so hard to try and convert, some new believers were misled and dropped out. Later in a gathering, Maya and I fellowshipped on the essence of this problem targeting Lillian's actions. We fellowshipped with her several more times after that. I thought she'd self-reflect, but she just wouldn't budge and kept sharing these biases against the waterers. She said she was feeling depressed and didn't know how she could do her job. Because of the discord she sowed, some brothers and sisters were grumbling to each other, and nobody was cooperating.
Doing that created a disruption to the church's work. That's a serious issue that needs fixing.
Yes.
It is. I knew Lillian wasn't suited to be a supervisor, and she should be dismissed right away. I regretted not acting fast. I should have investigated and dismissed her from the beginning. I knew she had bad humanity, but I gave her more chances to keep disrupting the church's work. I felt awful for what I had done. I then prayed to God, asking Him to guide me, to self-reflect and know myself. In my seeking, I saw God's word say this. What is the disposition of being irresponsible in duty, doing it carelessly, acting like yes men, and not defending the interests of God's house? This is cunning, and it is the disposition of Satan. The most striking item in man's philosophies for living is cunning. People think if they are not cunning, they'll offend others easily and cannot protect themselves. They think they must be cunning enough not to hurt or not to offend anyone, thereby keeping themselves safe, protecting their livelihoods, and gaining a firm foothold among the masses. Unbelievers all live by Satan's philosophy. They're all yes men, and do not offend anyone. You have come to God's house, read God's word, and heard the sermons of God's house. So what is the reason you're always being a yes man? Yes men will only protect their own interests, and not the interests of the church. When they see someone do evil and harm the church's interests, they ignore it. They like to play the nice guy and do not offend anyone. This is very irresponsible, and that kind of person is too cunning and untrustworthy. Amen.
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 I understood from the revelation of God's words that I'd been afraid of offending Lillian in an effort to maintain my image. When I saw her disrupting the church's work, I didn't stand up to defend it. Instead, I was a people pleaser with one eye open and one closed. That was irresponsible, cunning behavior. Unbelievers live by satanic philosophies so that they can protect their own interests. They carefully observe others before speaking, making them really crafty.
Right.
True.
I had the same attitude as an unbeliever. I saw that Lillian's humanity was no good. She had already become disruptive to church work. She should have been dismissed. But I didn't want the others to think I was upbraiding her or taking revenge on her. So I avoided the issue by not doing anything suspicious and put off handling Lillian. I wanted to wait until other brothers and sisters gained discernment over her. Wanting to protect my reputation and status, even knowing she was disrupting church work, I preferred having the church's interest harmed and not following the principles, nor exposing her. I was really crafty, selfish, and base. At this thought, I felt really regretful. I knew that I couldn't keep on doing things with one eye open and one closed, but I had to handle Lillian according to principle. I couldn't keep protecting my own interests.
Mm-hmm.
Maya and I went to talk to Lillian after that, exposing how she twisted things and arbitrarily spread her prejudices about others, sabotaging and hurting relationships between church members, and that she'd become a disturbance to church work. I was surprised that she didn't accept it at all, but lashed back at us, saying in a huff, "I shared issues with you, and you not only didn't resolve them, but nitpicked at me. I see you don't do any practical work." Seeing how overbearing she was being, with no self-awareness, we dissected the nature and consequences of her actions with relevant words of God. But she wouldn't take any of it in. She kept arguing her case and bickering with us. Afterward, I read a passage of God's words that helped me understand Lillian's essence. All who would often disturb and interrupt the church's work and the life of the church, who interfere severely with the life entry of God's chosen people, belong to non-believers, and they are evil people. The church must clear them out. So long as someone often disturbs the work and life of the church and does not accept being pruned and dealt with, giving warped justifications, then whoever they are and however they've behaved before, they must then be cleared out of the church. The sole purpose of doing so is to ensure the church's work progresses normally, and also to protect the interest of God's chosen people. Doing so is entirely in accord with the principles and entirely in accord with God's will. With people of a vicious disposition, whatever mistake they have made or bad thing they have done, no one may reveal them, and no one may deal with them or prune them. Should someone reveal and offend them, they will start becoming enraged. They will have their revenge and never drop the issue. They have no patience or tolerance or acceptance at all for others. What principle is their behavior based on? I'd rather offend all beneath heaven than for one of them to offend me. They do not abide being offended by anyone. Is this the kind of logic of the wicked? Such is the logic of the wicked. No one is allowed to offend them. Even the slightest brush is unacceptable, and they will hate anyone who brushes up against them. They'll never leave them alone or let it go. This is how wicked people are. Amen.
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 I saw from God's words that people with vicious dispositions won't accept truth. They develop hatred for anyone who exposes and points out their problems, then see them as an enemy and may lash out and take revenge. I held Lillian up against that. She never self-reflected or tried to learn about herself, and she hated whoever gave her suggestions, seeing them as her enemy. Twisting the truth, unwilling to change, spreading her prejudices and complaints about others, and sowing discord between members. This led to them being unable to work together and disrupted and hindered the gospel work. As the gospel work supervisor, she was playing the part of Satan's servant. The others tried giving her pointers and help, but she wouldn't accept it. She became hostile toward them and made false countercharges. She hated the truth and was sick of it by nature. She had been shown to be an evil person, and if we let her stay on in the church, it would just bring more trouble to the church's work. And so, Maya and I fellowshipped on Lillian's behavior according to the principles and dismissed her after the members' approval through a vote. We had her isolate and self-reflect, and would kick her out if there were further disruptions.
Thank God. That's a really good approach. When evil people are given limitations, church life isn't disrupted.
Very true.
Yes, that's right. Then everyone can do their duty in peace.
Yes.
Absolutely. Later on, others said one after another that working with Lillian was constraining. She was always imperiously scolding people, and many were scared of her. When she came to look into their work, everyone prepared ahead of time, afraid she'd scold them if they didn't explain things well.
The others being constrained to that point means that she did quite a bit of evil.
Yes.
She did. I felt really uneasy. Lillian had committed so much evil. She hurt others so much in the process. Though I was a church leader, when I found this evildoer, I didn't handle it. Then didn't I serve no practical purpose? I wasn't getting real work done at all. For a few days, I kept reflecting on why I could properly handle other evil people as well as antichrists, but I avoided and wouldn't handle the matter regarding Lillian's behavior. I read some of God's words.
Almighty God says, no matter what they're doing, the antichrists first consider their own interests, and they only act once they've thought it all out. They do not truly, sincerely, and absolutely obey the truth without compromise, but do so selectively and conditionally. What condition is this? It is that their status and reputation must be safeguarded and must not suffer any loss. Only after this condition is satisfied will they decide and choose what to do. That is, antichrists give serious consideration to how to treat the principles of the truth, God's commissions, and the work of God's house, or how to deal with something they are faced with. They do not consider how to fulfill God's will, how to keep from damaging the interests of God's house, how to satisfy God, or how to benefit the brothers and sisters. These are not the things they consider. What do antichrists consider? Whether their own status and reputation will be affected, and whether their prestige will be lowered. If doing something according to the principles of the truth would benefit the work of the church and bring benefit to the brothers and sisters, but would cause their own reputation to take a hit and make a lot of people realize their true stature, and know what sort of nature and essence they have, then they will definitely not act in accordance with the principles of the truth. If doing some practical work will cause more people to think highly of them, look up to them, and admire them, and enable their words to carry authority and make more people submit to them, then they will choose to do it that way. Otherwise, they absolutely will not give any consideration to the interests of God's house or of the brothers and sisters, and then choose to discard their own interests. This is the nature and essence of antichrists. Isn't it selfish and vile? If someone says they love the truth and that they pursue the truth, but in essence, the goal they pursue is to distinguish themselves, to show off, to make people think highly of them, to achieve their own interests, and the performing of their duty is not to obey or satisfy God, and instead is to achieve prestige and status, then their pursuit is illegitimate. That being the case, when it comes to the work of the church, are their actions an obstacle, or do they help move it forward? They are clearly an obstacle. They do not move it forward. Some people wave the banner of doing the work of the church, yet pursue their own personal prestige and status, run their own operation, create their own little group, their own little kingdom. Is this kind of person performing their duty? All the work they do essentially interrupts, disrupts, and impairs the work of the church. What is the consequence of their pursuit of status and prestige? First, this affects how God's chosen people eat and drink God's word and understand the truth. It hinders their life entry. It stops them from entering the right track of faith in God and leads them onto the wrong path, which harms the chosen ones and brings them to ruin. And what does it ultimately do to the work of the church? It is dismantlement, interruption, and impairment. This is the consequence brought about by people's pursuit of fame and status.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
God's words reveal that antichrists only consider their own name and status. If they can get something done that will improve their reputation and their image, an antichrist will do just that. If doing things according to principle could possibly damage their reputation or status, an antichrist will cast the principles aside and only think about what would protect their personal interests and what would benefit them. They're really selfish and vile. I was acting just like that of an antichrist. I'd known long ago Lillian had bad humanity and didn't pursue the truth. She despised anyone who gave her suggestions, finding fault with them, judging and attacking them. Not immediately dismissing her would hinder the church's work. But because she was biased against me, I was afraid of investigating and looking into her, and that the others would misunderstand me as punishing her, or even think I was a false leader. I felt my position would be threatened. And because of Lillian's disposition, I was worried that if I dismissed her, she'd just judge me behind my back or even condemn or report me. I felt handling her could only hurt me, not help me, and could easily impact my reputation and position. So I adopted a wait-and-see attitude and ignored things. I really was crafty and selfish, without any humanity. Before, when I discovered people who should be cleared out and expelled during our cleanup work, I was able to stick to the principles. That was because I didn't know most of those people. Most importantly, they didn't constitute a threat to my reputation. If I just cleared them out of the church, the others would think that as a church leader, I understood the truth and I could do practical work. But when handling Lillian, seeing it directly involve my name and status, I was like an ostrich with my head in the sand, trying to protect my own interests. I'd been able to stick to the principles before, which was predicated on things not involving my personal interests, not because I genuinely wanted to do the church's work.
Those motives in a duty are wrong. It's working for name and status, and you're likely to do evil and disrupt the church's work.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
That's right. I realized from God's words that working to protect your own name and status is in essence sabotaging and disrupting the church's work. It's hindering the work's normal progression. Wanting to protect my reputation and position, I didn't handle an evil person. The nature of that problem is really serious. It's not just a little corruption showing itself. It is shielding an evildoer, indulging her disruption of the church's work. That's acting as Satan's minion, and is also doing evil. This part was especially poignant. The way to treat an evil person with an evil essence is to restrain them or clear them out when they are not doing some kind of great evil in order to minimize their damage. This is the wise choice. It would be reactive to wait until it festers into a disaster, to then handle it. That would prove that the leaders are quite foolish and unprincipled in their deeds. Thinking over God's words made me feel terrible and really guilty. As a church leader, my job was to protect God's chosen people from evildoers' disturbances and to protect a proper life of the church, so that the church's work can proceed properly. But when an evil person appeared in the church, I dragged my feet and did nothing. I wasn't fulfilling a leader's responsibilities, which meant people were disrupted by the evildoer and their lives were harmed. Church work was also disrupted. What I had done was so disgusting to God.
Discovering an evildoer but not doing anything is like planting a time bomb. They could hurt people at any time and disturb the church's work.
Agreed. Church leaders handling evildoers to protect God's chosen is so important.
Yes.
You're right.
For a few days, I kept mulling things over. I knew well that an evildoer was disrupting the church's work, and handling evildoers quickly is in line with the principles. So why did I keep fearing that others would misunderstand and say I was lashing out at her? What really is lashing out at someone? I read this in God's words. It is a most common thing for antichrists to torment others, and it is a concrete way they manifest. In order for them to maintain their status, antichrists are always demanding that others obey them. If they find that someone does not heed them or is going against them, they will take maneuvers to suppress and torment that person to subdue them. Antichrists often suppress those whose opinions are different from their own. They often suppress people who pursue the truth and loyally perform their duties. They often suppress people of relative decency and uprightness, who do not bow and scrape or toady up to them. They suppress those who do not get along with or give in to them. Antichrists don't treat others by principles of the truth. They can't treat people fairly. If they dislike someone, or someone doesn't give in to them at heart, they find chances and excuses and false pretenses to attack and torment them, going so far as to take up the banner of doing church work to suppress them. They do not relent, nor do they hold back at all, until people become submissive and dare not say no. They do not relent until people have acknowledged their status and authority, and always greet them with a smile, expressing obedience toward them and not daring to develop negative opinions about them. In any situation, in any group, the word fairness doesn't apply to an antichrist's treatment of others, and the word loving doesn't apply to their treatment of those who truly believe in God. They regard whoever constitutes a threat to their status as an annoying person or a thorn in their side, and they will find chances and pretexts to torment them. They meet defiance with torment and don't stop until the person is subdued. Their doing so is quite out of line with the principles of the truth and at enmity with the truth. So should they be dealt with and pruned? That alone will not do. Nothing less than revealing, identifying, and characterizing them will do. An antichrist treats everyone according to their own preferences, their own intentions as well as their own ends. Under their authority, whoever has a sense of righteousness, whoever can speak justly, whoever dares fight injustice, whoever upholds the principles, whoever is genuinely talented, whoever can give testimony for God, all such people will meet with the Antichrist's jealousy, and they will be suppressed, excluded, and even trampled beneath the Antichrist's foot. Such is the hatred with which an Antichrist treats good people, people who pursue truth. It may be said that the basic majority of people whom an Antichrist is jealous of and suppresses are positive, good people. Most of them are people whom God will save, whom God can make use of, whom God will make perfect. In employing such tactics of suppression and exclusion against those whom God will save and make use of and make perfect, are antichrists not opponents of God? Are they not resistors against God? Amen.
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 Pondering God's words, I realized that lashing out and following the principles are two distinct things. One aspect is that we have to look at someone's motives, the other being if their treatment of others is based in the Word of God. If they're found to be an evil person or an antichrist based on the principles, clearing them out, expelling them from the church, is keeping others from harm and following the principles. It's not lashing out at all.
Exactly.
Yes.
But when the antichrists and evildoers suppress and lash out, it comes entirely from their vicious motivations. They're jealous of those who pursue the truth and have a sense of justice. They hate those who have discernment over them and dare to call them out. They eliminate dissenters to protect their own power and their status. They leap upon others' slightest issues and make a big deal of them. They even twist the facts around and slander others, leveling all sorts of accusations to get them kicked out. Their motives and intentions are entirely at odds with the truth and with God. They are condemned and damned by God. I was exposing and dismissing Lillian based on my discernment of her as an evil person according to God's words. It wasn't because of a personal grudge, and I wasn't lashing out at her.
Right.
Exactly.
It was to protect the church's work and the others from an evildoer's disruption. This was being principled.
Yes.
It was.
Agreed. I didn't understand what lashing out was, and I was just looking at the surface. I felt that if someone had a grudge, if I handled an issue with them, that was lashing out. I didn't look at whether they were evil or what role they were playing in the church. As a result, I was immobilized by my mistaken perspective. How foolish of me. Understanding all this really was freeing for me.
Thanks be to God. Understanding the truth is key.
Truly.
It is. Understanding the truth gives us insight, and we can uphold the principles without being so constrained.
Definitely. After that, I practiced doing my duty according to the principles. If I saw an issue with a brother or sister, I'd seek them out and do my best to fellowship and help them. Especially when it came to cleanup work. If it was determined someone was a candidate for expulsion, whatever they felt toward me, I'd handle it according to the principles. When I put that into practice, I felt much more at peace in my duty.
Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God. Now I've personally experienced that in a duty, we have to let go of our motives and our name and our status, uphold the principles, and protect the church's work to feel true peace and joy.
Thank God.
So true.
Thank God.